His consciousness of purpose halts at an even greater distance from the final purpose, whereas the spendthrift comes closer to the objects since his movement towards a rational goal stops at a later stage in order to annex it, as if it were the final goal itself. On the one hand, this formal identity of the complete opposition of visible results, and, on the other, the lack of a regulating concrete purpose which, with reference to the equal senselessness of both tendencies, suggests an uncertain interplay between them, explains the fact that avarice and extravagance are therefore often to be found in the same person, be it in their distribution over different spheres of interests or in connection with changing moods. Contraction and expansion of these moods is expressed in avarice and squandering as if, each time, the impulse were the same and merely its valency differed. The dual significance of money for our will is the result of the synthesis of two tasks performed by money. The more pressing and general the need for food and clothing, the more is the desire for them limited by nature. There may be sufficient quantities, particularly of what are necessities, which originally therefore are the most intensely desired. In contrast with our natural needs, the demand for luxury goods is unlimited. The supply of luxuries will never exceed the demand for them. For example, precious metals, insofar as they are the materials for jewelry, have an unlimited number of uses. This is the result of their basic superfluousness. The closer values stand to our basic life and the more they are conditions of bare survival, the stronger, but also the more limited as to quantity, is the direct demand, and the more likely it is that the point of satiety is reached at an earlier stage. On the other hand, the more removed values are from primary needs, the less is their demand measured in terms of a natural need, and the more they continue to exist relatively unchanged with regard to their available quantity. The scale of our needs moves between these two poles, either it is one of immediate intensity but then certainly limited by nature, or else it is the need for luxuries, in which case the lack of necessity is replaced by unlimited possibilities for their expansion. Whereas most cultural goods exhibit a certain mixture of these extremes, such that the approximation to the one corresponds to a growing distance from the other, money combines the maximum of both. Because it serves to satisfy the most indispensable as well as most dispensable needs of life, it associates the intense urgency or desire with its extensive unlimitedness. Money carries within itself the structure of the need for luxuries, in that it rejects any limitation upon desire for it, which would be possible only through the relation of definite quantities to our capacity to consume. Yet money, unlike a precious metal used for jewelry, does not need to balance the unlimited desire for it by a growing distance from direct needs, because it has become the correlate of the most basic needs of life as well. This remarkable dual character of money with reference to desire for it is presented in a detached form by avarice and extravagance, since in both instances money has dissolved into pure desire for it. Both exhibit the negative side of what we have also observed as a positive side to money, namely that money enlarges the diameter of the circle in which our antagonistic psychic drives flourish. What avarice exhibits, as it were, in material paralysis, extravagance reveals in the form of fluidity and expansion. Ascetic poverty on another level than extravagance, and in contrast to greed and avarice, there exists a second negative phenomenon, poverty as a positive value, poverty in itself as a satisfying purpose of life. The growth of one link of the sequence of purposes to absolute importance has been transplanted in a direction completely different to avarice and greed. Whereas they come to a halt with the conversion of means to final ends, poverty persists regardless of the absence of means or moves into the section that lies behind the final purpose inasmuch as it is the result of the terminated sequence of purposes. Poverty, like avarice and greed, appears in its purest and specific form only at a certain stage of the money economy. In natural conditions which are not yet regulated by a money economy, and as long as agricultural products do not circulate merely as commodities, that is as money values, the total destitution of an individual is less common. Even in recent times, Russia prided herself on there being no personal poverty in those areas less affected by a money economy. As a general phenomenon, this may be attributed not only to the easier availability of what is absolutely necessary without having to depend upon money, but also to the fact that humane and sympathetic feelings towards poverty are more easily aroused in these circumstances than where what the poor lack and what one can help them with is not what is most immediately necessary to them. In purely monetary relationships, sympathetic feelings have to make a detour before they reach the point of their genuine interest. They often flag during this detour. For this reason, practically helpful and charitable people prefer to come to the aid of the poor with food and clothing rather than with money. If poverty emerges as a moral ideal, then correspondingly the possession of money is detested as the most dangerous temptation, as the primary evil. Whenever the salvation of the soul is conceived as the final purpose, poverty is at the same time interpreted in many doctrines as a positive and indispensable means which rises above this position to the dignity of a value that is important and valid in itself. This may happen at different stages in the sequence of purposes and for different reasons. In the first place, the mere indifference towards all worldly enjoyments and interests may lead to it. This burden is removed from the aspiring soul as from itself without requiring a will which is specifically directed towards it. The first. Christians may frequently have behaved in this way, that is, not directly antagonistic and aggressive towards tangible goods, but simply lacking any relation to them, just as to things that we cannot perceive because we lack the necessary organ. Therefore, the sporadic communism of early Christianity is fundamentally opposed to the attempts at modern communism, since the former originates from indifference towards worldly goods, the latter from the greatest devaluation of them. A mixture of both occurred in the intervening period. The socialist-revolutionary movements at the end of the Middle Ages certainly struggled against poverty, but they were in part supported by ascetic movements with their ideal of complete frugality. However, at least with regard to money, ascetism has to abandon its mere dismissal of material interest and to acquire more positive and resolute forms, since one continually confronts it on the road to the most indispensable and since its acquisition requires more attentiveness and activity of the will than the resultant concern with subsistence. Whoever wished to be so indifferent to this interest that, like the father of the church who ate axle grease for butter without noticing it, can nonetheless, if he wants to exist at all in a period of money transactions, not permit the smallest amount of his consciousness to be distracted in this manner for its acquisition.